Meet the computer you can talk to. With Copilot on Windows, working, creating, and collaborating is as easy as talking. Got writer's block? Share your screen with Copilot Vision to help spark inspiration, and use Copilot Voice to have a conversation and brainstorm ideas. Or maybe you need some tech help. With Copilot Vision, Copilot sees what you see. Let Copilot talk you through step-by-step guidance so you can master new apps, games, and skills faster. Try now at windows.com/Copilot.
Purina believes no one should have to make the impossible choice between their own safety and their pets. But nearly half of domestic abuse survivors delay leaving because they can't bring their pets with them. Through the Purple Leash Project, Purina is helping create more pet-friendly domestic violence shelters so survivors and their pets can escape and heal together. Visit purina.com/purple to learn more.
Hello, I'm Diane Morgan. If you know who I am, you know who I am. If you don't, who cares? I'm here to explain Italian Time, a holiday phenomenon where Italians throw away their clocks and gather for eternity with San Pellegrino. I've been at this party so long that I've eaten 5 courses, hugged someone's grandma twice, and been offered a job in the family restaurant. So this holiday season, make sure to bring enough San Pellegrino to last you through the meal, the after meal, and the entire goodbye ritual. San Pellegrino, holiday on Italian Time.
Breaking news are happening now.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Reality Flash. My name is Mike Bloom, and I'm here to bring you the flashiest breaking news in the wild world of reality TV. Or, in other words, I get to tell you what is going on. Before we get into today's topic, of course, I would never be one to fish for likes, but I am always fishing for subs and tips here on The Reality Flash. So please be sure to subscribe to this podcast at therealityflash.com. And while you're there, any ratings or reviews would, of course, be greatly appreciated. And of course, if you spot any reality TV news that you want me to cover here, no spam, no solicitations, just tips at therealityflash.com. What would you do if your entire world turned out to be fake? If an army of writers, producers, and actors spent over a year creating TV's most elaborate experiment around you? If they plotted your every move, recorded it 24 hours a day, and put it on national television? So these aren't just the ravings of Rodney from Survivor on Instagram. They are also the words that kicked off the Joe Schmo Show back in 2003. And those words began one of the biggest hoaxes, not only in reality TV, but TV history in general. So the concept is simple. There are 1 or 2 normal people, or Joe Schmoes, if you will, who are cast in what they think is an actual reality show with actual contestants for actual prize money. The catch: every single thing around them is entirely scripted, from the cast to the challenges to even the eliminations. And now it is coming back. For the first time in over a decade, the Joe Schmo Show has returned to our airwaves, having premiered its 4th season, or first season in the reboot, whatever you want to call it, last night. So a new decade for the Joe Schmo Show means a lot of new contained therein. We've got a new fake show that is sort of serving as this facade. We have a new host in 5-time Emmy nominee Kat Deely. We even have a new network in TBS that is airing this show. But despite all of the newness, the concept is still the same at its core: to pull off one of the biggest high-wire acts ever constructed on TV and make one person believe that they are actively participating in what is one of the most objectively ridiculous reality shows ever constructed. But before we get into what this revival looks like, and I'm actually going to bring in a special guest to do so later on in the podcast, I think it makes sense to go through the origin and history of this show and what has gotten us to the point where it's being brought back from the dead. That way, you can grow with everything to know about Joe Schmo. So, the fall of 2003. Spike, remember Spike? Spike aired the first season of the Joe Schmo Show. So at its center was the titular Schmo, in this guy, Matt Kennedy Gould, who was this law school dropout who was currently living with his parents. But the Pittsburgh native had absolute nerves of steel when he chose to sign up for what he thought was going to be this new reality show called Lap of Luxury. In actuality, every move that was made by the host, his competitors, and the producers was planned out specifically and solely to gauge his reactions, to see how far this proverbial girder could bend before it broke under the absolutely ludicrous circumstances around him. The format of Lap of Luxury was akin to Survivor, actually. So every week, someone won a challenge and was safe through wearing this like immunity pimp coat. I really am not doing it justice by describing it as that. But then the group would vote to evict basically one of everyone who was vulnerable, everyone except the weekly pimp, I suppose, from this big mansion where they were staying, the Lap of Luxury. The elimination ceremony itself was an absolute stitch, as the host, Ralph Garman, held a china plate of the eliminated contestant and with the straightest face had to say, "Ashes to ashes, dust to dust, blank, you're dead to us," and then smash it in the fire. And so some of these challenges to earn the pimp coat included things like licking chocolate to reveal letters to spell a word, to do wrestling in giant sumo suits, like that one episode of The Office that was also based off of Survivor. And actually, like their first big immunity challenge was keeping a body part on a half-naked adult film star for as long as possible. Let me again remind you that this show originally aired on Spike, which for those of you that may not remember it or, were not watching television at the time, is essentially the network equivalent of like those random ads you get on the internet for these gummies that will increase your testosterone levels. So what's really interesting about the Joe Schmo Show is that while it is, for all intents and purposes, like an unscripted, scripted show, I guess is the best way that it's marketed, the way it's edited is much more like a documentary. Throughout all the seasons that we've seen of it so far, we obviously get a lot of talking heads from the marks, I suppose, or the mats in this case. But we also get sound bites from the cast and crew as they're sort of like recounting and providing their own reactions to all of the ridiculousness around them. Speaking of prank shows with Rob Dyrdek. But much like Survivor transformed in the third episode of its first season, of course, having the first ever alliance truly be born and execute its first move, ironically enough, in pretty much the same milestone, the Joe Schmo Show also really pivoted everything it was aiming towards. So, to provide a bit of background, there was a contestant who was recently eliminated. His name was Earl. He was a grizzled veteran. He was a clear send-up of characters like Rudy Bosch at the time. But nobody really expected that Matt had formed this ultra-tight relationship with Earl, which is pretty ridiculous considering that his name wasn't even Earl. But it got to the point where following Earl's elimination, Matt sank down on the stairs. He was weeping. He was bemoaning out loud if the $100,000 prize was worth any of the emotional turmoil he was going under. And it was then when the Joe Schmo Show changed as a concept for those that were in the weeds. Because up to this point, it had been essentially this big elaborate prank show, right? Let's put this guy in increasingly ridiculous situations. Let's see how he's going to react. But then the producers kind of anticipated how much the audience would end up sympathizing with somebody like Matt because of how open his heart was and how earnest he was. And so they decided that the rest of the season was not going to be about punching down, but actually propping up. They rigged certain challenges moving forward so that Matt could actually win, try to, while still kind of making him go through the ups and downs of participating on a reality show, largely wanted to sort of showcase his morality. And this all culminated in the finale when the curtain drops and the entire charade is revealed, right? It was the moment we had all been waiting for. And as Matt's reality comes crashing down around him, all he could utter was this opening line that I quoted at the beginning. What is going on? And a legendary hit first season officially found its tagline at the 11th hour. The Joe Schmo Show was absolutely groundbreaking for its time. The genre itself was only about a few years old at the time that the first season came around, but this was far and away the most meta take we had done on the reality TV genre. I would actually almost compare it to like what Scream was to horror movies. The finale ended up actually being the most watched, I think, non-wrestling program on TNT or Spike, which granted is kind of like saying you're the tallest kindergartner, but still, like, that's a high accommodation for the episode to fill. And Matt ends up even earning a spot on Battle of the Network Reality Stars on Bravo a couple of years later. And to show again the caliber that he's, alongside now in the Pantheon, on his team in that show was Dr. Will Kirby, Sue Hawk, and even Theo Vaughn, who was then just a wee bit babyface. So, of course, with how much of a smash success the first season was, the sequel was inevitable. So the next year, 2004, Joe Schmo 2 ends up airing, and they upped the ante by bringing in 2 schmoes for the price of 1 season. So this was Tim Walsh, Ingrid Weiss. They had chosen to compete on a show called Last Chance for Love, which is obviously a send-up of The Bachelor, The Bachelorette. They actually had a Bachelor and a Bachelorette, so it was sort of like running simultaneously. Of course, in true sequel fashion, the production elements were like increasingly absurd. They had this recurring idea of the Falcon twist, where a legitimate Falcon flew in with a big twist contained within its talons. But season 2 is probably most well known for what ended up being the absolute worst case scenario you could have for a show like this, which is someone finding out that it was all a hoax. So Ingrid had caught on almost immediately to things being like a little off, starting when, as they were lining up for the show to open, one contestant kind of like flippantly told her, "Oh yeah, my agent arranged for me to be on this show." Ingrid had also realized that people had sort of prepared these speeches for the show's equivalent of the rose ceremony, which, I kid you not, involved the Bachelor giving his prospective suitors pearl necklaces. Again, Spike. And then at a certain point, production eventually decided, okay, we're going to give up the ghost here. They decide to reveal to Ingrid that, yes, her suspicions of this being staged were absolutely correct. And in lieu of that, sort of like out of the traitors, actually, they gave her that ultimatum. They could either recruit her or she would be murdered. And so she chose the former. And she went to go from, someone who was brought in as a normal person to becoming the quote-unquote schmo turned actress. And so then they brought in a new schmo, Amanda Naughton, to sort of fill in her place. But there was still sort of some complications involved in here, specifically around the emotions involved. We talked about, Matt's big turning point, weeping on the stairs. Again, realize this was a romantic show rather than like the strict competition of season 1. And so ideally, you want your leads to find love over the course of the season. So it's kind of tough to swallow, especially from a modern day lens of like, oh, this is leading on to the umpteenth degree, right? Like, it's feeling a little exploitative. And even the actress who was playing the Bachelorette that was wooing Tim was like, I don't feel good about this. This guy's falling in love with me, and I'm not really this person. So they did get to the end of the season, despite kind of the ookiness. There was a big double reveal for Tim and Amanda. And at the end of it all, while it was a successful season at the end of the day, fans felt that Joe Schmo had lost like a little bit of that original flavor, And perhaps that's why the show went away for nearly 10 years until out of nowhere, in the beginning of 2013, season 3 of the Joe Schmo Show just like suddenly pops up. Again, still on Spike. This is a fake show now called The Full Bounty, where contestants were thrust in the middle of Dog the Bounty Hunter-like environments. This season's Schmo was named Chase Rogan, which actually does sound like the name of like an action hero or a bounty hunter. And the season actually featured its first piece of stunt casting with Lorenzo Lamas appearing as himself. What's interesting about the Joe Schmo Show is that generally they want to cast unknowns, right? Like they don't want to give up the ruse immediately of, oh, I saw you at the Comedy Store the other day. Clearly you're not the person that you say you are. But despite this, a number of its alumni would go on to prominence in the world of comedy and acting. The list includes people like Jonathan Torrance, who fans of the Trailer Park Boys might recognize as J-Rock. We have Natasha Leggero. We have David Hornsby, Rickety Cricket from It's Always Sunny. But of course, the biggest one has to be Kristen Wiig. So Kristen appeared in season 1 as Dr. Pat, this marriage quack, who actually ends up getting realistically, like, sincerely concussed in a challenge by Matt, who was so mad at a storyline that she had recently brought up. And of course, she would go on to become this massive star from SNL and even get nominated for an Oscar for Bridesmaids. Yes, you've heard that correctly. The Joe Schmo Show on Spike produced an actual Oscar nominee. And of course, these actors were hired to play a cast of characters themed around typical archetypes from reality television, like the schemer, the rich bitch, the drunk, the gotta be gay guy. Again, this was the early 2000s on Spike. And perhaps most specifically, one of my favorite ones from actually the 3rd season was the deaf girl and the interpreter, which was a very clear send-up of when Marlee Matlin and her interpreter were on The Celebrity Apprentice. Again, very niche reference. Unfortunately, after airing its 3rd season, the pleas from fans to continue this big ruse, unfortunately, fell onto deaf ears. Until now. I'll be back in a flash with a special guest to tell you all about the 2025 revival of the Joe Schmo Show and what we can look forward to from the newest edition.
The Who's Down in Who Newville were making their list, but some didn't know Walmart has the best brands for their gifts.
What about toys? Do they have brands kids have been wanting all year?
Yep, Barbie, Tony's, and Lego. Gifts that will make them all cheer.
Do you mean they have all the brands I adore?
They have Nintendo, Nespresso, Apple, and more.
What about...
So the Who answered questions from friends till they were blue. Each one listened and shouted, from Walmart? Who knew? Shop gifts from top brands for everyone on your list in the Walmart app.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Hi, I'm here to pick up my son Milo.
There's no Milo here. Who picked up my son from school?
Streaming only on Peacock.
I'm gonna need the name of everyone that could have a connection.
You don't understand. It was just the 5 of us.
So this was all planned.
What are you gonna do? I will do whatever it takes to get my son back.
I honestly didn't see this coming. These nice people killing each other.
All Her Fault. A new series streaming now only on Peacock.
All right. So I've talked a lot about the past of Joe Schmo. Let's talk about the present, as we have recently watched the premiere of the Joe Schmo Show season 4 on TBS. And I am not alone here. We continue to break new ground in the early stages of the reality flashes. I'm bringing on my first guest, and it's only appropriate given that the show within the show for season 4 of Joe Schmo is The GOAT. I think fittingly we should bring on one half of the coverage we had of another reality show called The GOAT that honestly seemed to have like the same production budget for it. But regardless, so excited to have on the one, the only Chappell to the Reality Flash.
Hey, thank you, Mike, for having me here on the Reality Flash. This is nice. I like your setup.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, you are indeed the horniest one among us. So I think it makes sense that you are on to talk about the GOAT and the Joe Schmo Show in general. Obviously, we have a little bit to get into with the premiere proper. But before we get into it, what's your history with Joe Schmo? What were your expectations going into this premiere?
Yeah, I was there. I was there for the first Joe Schmo. I remember, like, what is going on? Like, I remember all of that. I remember Joe. I remember all of the ups and downs. And then I've read in recent years that, that kind of stuff is very traumatic. And maybe, just maybe, it's not easy to get over getting fooled by a bunch of people that you grow to enjoy and to trust in front of a million people or millions of people. And so they're going to do it again. They said, hey, we traumatized one guy. Let's bring it back. Let's find a Joeier, Schmoier guy and put them up to the test. And now we get Ben. And at first I was a little skeptical because I remember the original Joe Schmo. That's a lovable guy. Like he was so lovable that the show wasn't even prepared for how lovable he would be. Ben, I see it for Ben too. I could see this happening. So now I think I'm all in on watching someone else get embarrassed and traumatized and hopefully get rich by the end of this.
So, as I talked about before, there is a lot of new that exists within the Joe Schmo Show. We have a new host, Ralph Garman, who was the voice actor, who was the host for the first few seasons, is out and is a seasoned professional in Kat Deely. Very much showing how much of a professional she is, considering she has to keep a straight face during some of these absolutely ludicrous elements of the show. But what's very interesting, Chappell, is I don't know if you paid attention to some of the credits on the Joe Schmo Show. There was a lot to take in, but there are some new faces behind the scenes, and they're not new to fans of, in particular, CBS reality television, as one of the main producers of this reboot of the Joe Schmo Show is none other than Fly on the Wall Entertainment, which Big Brother fans might know is the production company led by Allison Grodner and Rich Meehan, who have been the showrunners of Big Brother for quite some time at this point. And especially looking at the construction of the GOAT and a show within a show, it makes so much sense now in retrospect.
Yeah, I mean, you point out that it's the Fly on the Wall Entertainment people who brought us the HOH and Big Brother, and looking at the the Joe Schmo. So this time around, we have the holder of the horns, aka the HOH here. So I was like, oh, okay, I see what they did there. I was very happy with what could be a wacky, ridiculous show, and I think Grodner and folks are the perfect people to give you a wacky, ridiculous show.
That's the thing, is that now they're kind of steering into the curve of what I think a lot of people have kind of been lambasting them for in the past when it comes to Big Brother. What I will say, and I had reminded myself a bit in the first part of this podcast of checking out the history of Joe Schmo, so I went back and watched the first few seasons, snatches, bits and pieces. First off, definitely holds up. Secondly, what I do find interesting is in those initial stages, you get a lot of these briefings with the director who is very sure to remind the actors and the producers alike, like, we got to slow roll this, you got to boil the frog slowly. We want to make sure that they're not immediately questioning everything that's going on. That happened with one case in season 2. And you would think that Allison Grodner and Rich Meehan know that it's a marathon, not a sprint. But one thing I will say, Chappell, is they kind of did a lot in this premiere. Obviously the GOAT is this highfalutin farce where you have, to your point, the holder of the horns, which is like this big eyes wide shut golden mask that the person who's immune wears. They have the clamps that they put the two nominated people put themselves in. People are eliminated by smashing an urn that has like the worst screen printing job of their face on it as possible. But I do think, and it's something that does get clocked by our main schmo Ben here in the very beginning, and maybe it's because we're coming back after almost a decade, we're on a new network, we have a new host and everything. They wanted to start off with a bang, but it's sort of come at the cost of, in my opinion, maybe being a little too extra in the first round here.
Yeah, but I kind of read it in two ways. Yeah, first, coming out the gate, this looks like a cartoon. These people are like, obviously, this is over the top, this is wacky, and almost unbelievable. If you're Ben, you have no reason not to believe this unless it gets any crazier, and it does. From jump, it gets wild. They immediately eliminate someone, and she goes out screaming and hollering and giving a shout out to the other black person and being like, you can hold it tight, brother, stuff like that. And Ben asks, like, is she an actor? But to me, I'm looking at it like, yeah, she could be an actor, but who isn't in reality TV these days, right? Like an actor, an influencer. The first time Joe Schmo happened, that was back when people thought reality TV was real. and that people were coming on the show for the real reasons, for the right reasons, to be, whatever that means on a show that you're trying to win a bunch of money for. But here, I think it's not out of the question to say, like, did production set this up? Did they set this up? We're still in a real game, but maybe they're sprinkling some extra stuff in here, like an Ainsley twist, since we're talking about Big Brother, of people who aren't really in the game, who are just there for drama.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that Ben doesn't catch on to because he is in the line of fire and is more so freaking out about the chance of him going home first, but like, when they pull out those urns, shouldn't they have shown that to the actors ahead of time? Because you see at least like a third of the cast, Chappell, not be able to hold it together. They're corpsing like Jimmy Fallon and Horatio Sands on SNL. Now, maybe part of that, to your point, is like, it's still relatively in character for them that they would think it's ridiculous, but at the same time, I don't know. There's a chance that things might not go right. I still think they're going to be able to keep things on rails because I do believe that Ben seems like a very nice, albeit sheltered kind of guy. But I don't know. The seams are starting to fray a bit in the beginning here.
It's trying to stop yourself from laughing at the absurdity of the thing that you're doing. And I think that Ben himself is even laughing. He's there. So he knows I'm not an actor. And I think this is stupid. I think this is funny. I think it's dumb. But when you have the entire cast fighting back tears to stop from laughing at the idea that this is about to happen, that these ridiculous pictures on these urns are about to get smashed, that Jonathan Lipnicki, of all people, is like an asshole and ruining his entire game and throwing it away. Just, it's so bad that I think if I'm in the situation, I too am thinking, what did I sign up for? But I don't know if I necessarily think this is a big prank on me. Mike, you're an improv guy. Yeah. How hard would it have been to not laugh in this situation? Because I also know that you don't know when to not laugh.
Yeah, that's very true as well. That's my one Achilles heel.
Yeah.
But I think that it's tough because it's also a bit like a viral aspect as well, right? In that, like, these people have clearly bonded behind the scenes. We get a lot of talking heads and also like double talking heads sometimes of how much these people have bonded. And so it's like, oh, this isn't another actor laughing. This is my friend laughing. And so that almost makes it even worse. Hopefully people will get used to the faces on the urns, because otherwise, I don't know, the producers might have to step in with that one girl that started it all and like have a talking to her and be like, oh, press another button. We have to take her out ASAP.
Yeah. This was all so absurd, though. Even just the idea that the elimination is you're getting put in the clamps of Capricorn or something like that, right?
Yeah.
The Capricorn clamps, and you're in a torture device, and you're just standing here locked up like some medieval, criminal, and you have Jonathan Lipnicki cursing people out, sitting right next to you and quoting Jerry Maguire. Like, how could you not laugh? Even if this was the most serious show in the world, I probably would be in tears as well.
Yeah, so you talk about Jonathan Lipnicki. We continue from where we left off with our piece of celebrity casting. He's among, of course, our group full of some chuckle hearts, but still filling the roles of some of our reality TV stereotypes, right? We have the alpha, we have the YouTube prankster, the conspiracy theorist, there's the older woman that is there, the way too close siblings. A fun one and done appearance for Jonathan Lipnicki. His cameo probably weighed less than a human head did, but very fun to have him just randomly show up and act like such an a-hole that he gets unceremoniously booted, especially right next to the hero of our story.
Right. And it's like, you brought in Jonathan Lipnicki and you say he is an actor. And so we're being upfront about there's an actor right here. And so I think it's to let your guard down, to where you're like, oh, okay, well, if they were just going to try to trick me, they wouldn't use actual actors that I could actually potentially recognize, right? With an IMDb page. So they throw him in there almost like this red herring. Because if you're so worried about him being an actor, maybe you're not keying into the idea that the rest of these people can be actors and actresses. To me, I think Kat Deely was another really good call for them, because this is my girl. Of all the hosts, Julie, sorry, Jeff, sorry, Kat Deely, that's my girl. I'm a So You Think You Can Dance OG, okay? So when you bring her in, I heard her voice in the voiceover, and I said, no, it can't be Kat, because why would Kat Deely be tied to something like this? And so the fact that she's there, even though she's saying Shabuya he, it really just, it does add a little bit of, okay, Kat Deely wouldn't have signed up to prank me, so maybe I could let my guard down a little bit more.
So, Chappell, as I was watching this, I kept going back to it. Maybe it was the corpsing on the brain, but this classic Lorne Michaels quote and question, why now? because you look at the fact that we are in the third decade of reality TV, right? When Joe Schmo was first created, it was kind of as a way to lampoon the genre. It doesn't really seem like we're necessarily kind of in that mood as of late. In fact, reality TV has kind of gone from like this rebellious new upstart to the machine of television to becoming a cog in the system and a rather large one to that point. And, also the fact that you could argue now more than ever, we have people questioning the natures of what's around them, right? Of, oh, is this a Photoshop job? Is this a deep fake? Am I living inside a simulation? Is this person a paid actor? Wouldn't it be more difficult to try to convince someone that everything around them is real? But then I think about the other side of things. First off, there's the timing of the fact that Jury Duty came around, which for those who don't remember was the big like Amazon freebie hit that was a mockumentary, but sort of a take on this, right? A long con, a deeply held hoax where one guy was put in these ridiculous scenarios without necessarily realizing it too. And it was one of the best shows of the year. And so there's also the idea that social media has kind of brought about this idea as well for all of us of like main character syndrome, right? This idea of like, oh, well, I am someone who will go and film what's going on because I'm the hero of this story and I'm the aggrieved and whatever's happening, it revolves around me. So like, maybe it is not necessarily outside the realm of possibility. I mean, hell, Chappell, you just have to look at like the past decade of us as humankind to think, yeah, it's not exactly completely outlandish that I have to kneel on a cushion and put my hands and head in stocks and wait to see if my poor caricature artist of an urn gets smashed.
Yeah, it's stupid, but it's not unbelievable because of the TV that we watch. We watch The Traitors, we watch The Anonymous. These shows that they're equally as wacky. It's just because we know they're real. We're like, all right, we saw it with our own eyes. We saw it. We were not pranked. We're okay with that. Even the stuff on Big Brother. I mean, the stuff on Big Brother is so stupid that sometimes I have to question, like, dang, RHAP hired me for the wrong reason. Should I be like, what are we doing here? So I think that if you're going to do this is the time to do it, especially when the premise is, hey, this is a show that is international and it's coming to the US. And so this is the first season ever of The GOAT show. Now, mind you, there is another The GOAT, as you pointed out, but this particular one is supposed to be an adaptation of a Korean show, right? And so we see that all the time now. We get shows from international countries.
The Traitors was an international adaptation.
Exactly. And they come over and now we have the US version. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that they would do something like this for a show you've never heard of, because as everybody else in the room has seemingly heard of it. I thought making him a recruit who didn't understand that the game already existed and that other people would be familiar with it was a very good idea too.
So I think much like the leisure suits that these contestants are wearing, the Joe Schmo Show is on the right track to being able to pull this off. Again, I think after a couple of hiccups, a couple of bleats, if you will, we are in full trot. And I'm very excited to see how we follow this up, how the circumstances will be both adaptable from Ben and the contestants and then also become increasingly ridiculous because they're going to throw more and more stuff out at the wall as a fly on the wall. Chappell, any other quick thoughts you have about the premiere of the Joe Schmo Show?
No, this is insane. All of it is crazy. And the whole time I just can't stop thinking of our first Joe Schmo. He did not have a good experience. He had some ups and downs. I remember reading about it in several like publications and in books where it's like, there were times where he was like, no, it was all fun and I made friends and it made me look good. And then there are other times where he's like, I don't know who I can trust, what I can trust. And I don't know if people still think I look like an idiot. And so I'm concerned about Ben, and I'm hoping that they take a little bit more care in this guy because the first Joe Schmo would probably say, depending on which day you ask him, that it wasn't the best experience. And I'm hoping that we would have a better experience for Ben this time around.
Well, we'd like to hear from you all as well. What do you think about the return of the Joe Schmo Show? What do you remember about its past iterations? If you've watched the premiere, what are your thoughts by comparison? Do you think it could work in a 2025 lens? Be sure to let us know in the comments on social media. I love reading through them all, seeing your thoughts and even sometimes your miscellaneous recommendations like at Spicy Marco BB posted on the last video I did with a recommendation as to a new sign-off for the show that I'm going to try out right now. And of course, again, If you see something, say something. If you have any reality TV news that you want me to cover here on the Reality Flash, no spam and no solicitations, just tips at therealityflash.com. Just tips at therealityflash.com. Chappell, thank you for officially, chomping this cherry. You have become the first guest on the Reality Flash, hopefully not the last, especially from your perspective. You're talking about a lot of reality TV and otherwise out there on your own and absolutely making it hustle. The true GOAT, I would say, of podcasting in many ways. What do you want to plug for the listeners out there?
Go check out my website, recapkickback.com.
Go check it out.
Go check it out. Go check out recapkickback.com, youtube.com/@recapkickback, where you can see me podcasting with a lot of the RHAP faves, but just talking about whatever I want to talk about. And it's been a great time. We're coming up on a year anniversary. So go check it out. Go subscribe and help me get to the next landmark before the year shows up and then Rob starts to decide if this is all a big prank and he wants to get rid of me.
That would be the best. I mean, that they keep making comparisons to the Truman Show. That would be like the next natural step in evolution until we get to that point, right? Of instead of just being a show, it's an entire podcast or podcast empire as an elaborate hoax.
Like this whole time, I thought I was a podcaster, and everybody's just in on the joke that Rob gave this Make-A-Wish kid the chance to talk on a microphone. I need subscribers, y'all. Let's keep me in a job.
Well, no joke. I had such a great time having you on, Chappell, and talking about the Joe Schmo Show in general as we welcomed in its return. That's going to do it for this episode of The Reality Flash. Of course, I'll return in your eyes and ears in due time with more reality TV news that you need to know as it breaks. Thank you all so much for listening. You've just been flashed.